is everyone? Excellent. Well, it is a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. I'm Tara Horner. I'm from the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, and I currently serve as coordinator of the Citadel's higher ed leadership programs, master's degrees and graduate certificates. And the previous decade, I've served as an associate provost at the college, talking about a lot of the different processes that we'll be addressing. So the spirit of today is in not recreating the wheel and being able to really dip into the different institutional processes and existing resources on campuses and adding those considerations to our leadership toolkit. And so 3 of the key things that we'll talk about today are strategic planning processes, both within the chapter, as well as how to link those to the institutional strategic planning process and to be able to leverage across the institution's planning landscapes. We'll also talk about assessment and institutional effectiveness in terms of data availability and how we can share back and forth through veterans chapters to institutional research and assessment offices and vice versa. And also in engaging in fundraising processes with offices of institutional advancement or development and how to leverage all 3 of those processes together. And so when we think about those 3 different institutional processes, they have an awful lot in common. They all are really focused on enhancing student success and really organizational learning and improvement, and also telling our own story, whether that's from the chapter perspective or really aiding the institution in advocating for the chapter, being able to leverage those different communication strands and processes to be able to share that story in a way that's really going to resonate with potential donors and prospective students. It also is really critical in investing in student success. And so when we think about the complexity of student success initiatives that we may want to institute, be it at the chapter level or at the institutional level, there's a lot to it when we think about how critical it is to both the student and the institution. Also, the complexity of student development theory and everyone developing at a different stage and time period, as well as the transition and process, is a little bit different for each person in some cases. And so looking at campus-wide collaboration is absolutely key, and being able to really tell our story in a way that gains that administrative and board level visibility that then drives the resources. So our conversation today is going to be really narrowed into these 5 different areas, and we'll take them one by one, and I'll try to save lots of time at the end for questions. So the first consideration in strategic planning processes, any accredited college is required as part of their accreditation process to have an ongoing cyclical strategic planning process. And so in thinking about our own toolkit and advocating for our veteran success chapters, it's important to think about not only strategic planning at the chapter level and how we can really make it a continuous cycle so that as we transition and graduate and have new leaders come on board, that there's that continuity in planning, but also to be able to target the institutional level strategic plan. And so starting at number 1, strategic initiatives, those are those huge kind of rocks in the jar, those 5 to 8 overarching umbrella items that is a strategic plan kind of organizer. When we think about those strategic initiatives, it's valuable to be able to try to sync those with the chapter level strategic initiatives. And so a couple of ways to think about that One is an exercise, if you're starting kind of from that, either a refresh point or a starting point with your own strategic planning at the organizational level, is to think about a newspaper headline generation exercise of getting everyone together or even virtually and saying, what are the headlines that you wish for the chapter, the organization, the unit in the future, and have all of those ideas come into that strategic planning process. Another approach is using a SWOT analysis, where we're really looking at the strengths and the weaknesses and the opportunities and threats. And most importantly, what we think are going to be the internal and external factors that influence the organization and what we want to look like in the future. Another strategy would be using a much more formalized approach of starting a new strategic planning process from scratch, where we might have invitation letters go out, encouraging participation and collaboration, a description of what the process is going to look like, a timeline, a little bit about a SWOT analysis results or environmental scan. And then what I think is most important is to really start by that proposal planning process, where I'll provide an example here that we use at the Citadel, where we would take all of those strategic level initiatives, those big rocks in the jar, and come up with great ideas that link with one of those. And we would go into detail of the actions that are required, the timeline, and being able to sync those ideas together. And so looking at the institutional level strategic plan and really seeing where the synergies are with your own goals and initiatives is really, really helpful in this process. And it helps administrators see exactly where those synergies that they can support and draw upon the chapter leadership as well. Also really important is thinking about the planning horizon. For example, do we want to use a 3-year strategic planning process, or do we want to use a 5-year or a 7-year? A lot of that is going to depend on asking a lot of questions about where the resources are and how they flow. For example, if the ideas that you have for your chapter are really tangible and operational in a 1 to 2 year time span, and are relatively small in terms of the amount of resources that are going to be needed for that particular endeavor, it might be a smaller planning horizon. Or if they are much more, let's say we want to build a new Veteran Success Center, lots of brick and mortar, lots of capital investment, we may need a longer planning horizon to be able to get the state resources or to leverage donors in that process. I know that at our institution we use a lot of alumni pledges, and alumni have 3 to 5 years to fulfill that pledge, a little bit over each year. And so making sure that we're thinking about exactly how long we need for those resources to come into play is really important. Another thing to think about is integrated strategic planning. Just like there are nuggets of data all over a college campus, there are also strategic plans everywhere. Every academic unit is going to have them, student affairs units, athletics units, as well as the overarching strategic plan and financial plans. And so your leadership initiatives within your own planning process are likely going to find lots of collaborative partners that are interested in working with your unit to really leverage both both sides of progress. And so having those conversations and knowing what's in all of these unit level strategic plans can really be valuable. Number two, it's also really important to think about leveraging the planning process in terms of the resource aspect. And so if we think about how we prioritize, that really comes into play in the resource linkage and the required actions. And so thinking about strategic initiatives, this is an example from ours of the 6 overarching elements in the strategic plan. And all of our veterans initiatives fall under number 3 that are highlighted here from the Veteran Success Center perspective. However, we do have a lot of overlap of veteran success initiatives that fall under each of these strategic planning elements. And these are just a few examples of that next objective level of how we would draw that crosswalk between the two. And then really driving into key performance indicators and the required actions to take those underway. So central to this, whether we're talking about strategic planning at the institutional level or at a chapter level or division or any office within the university, is thinking about how we prioritize among all these great ideas. We've got 100 great ideas that have come in. What is going to take us the furthest in terms of making that difference? And so coming to a common understanding of how each of those ideas is going to be judged is really valuable, and it adds a lot of transparency and trust building into the process as you're undergoing that, whether at the chapter level or at the university level. So these are just a few examples of the ones that we utilize here at the Citadel. 1, the centrality to the mission. 2, the trajectory. Does a good idea get us from point A to point B, or does it get us from point A to point D? What's going to give us the most bang for the resources there? How realistic it is, the measurable, and then definitely cost savings or revenue generation, the ROI aspect. In thinking about the financial information, it's really key to know and to ask questions of how your advancement and development offices are structured. Knowing whether there's a gift officer for each of the VP areas, or if they're divided by schools, or how student affairs and the veteran unit is supported within the college advancement operation can give a lot of insight of how to structure the asks and the strategic planning linkages with development. Also knowing and asking a lot of questions about the types of fundraising strategies that your university is utilizing is valuable. Knowing that comfort level of what the kind of go-to strategies are for the university can help you really develop your own asks and strategies in working and collaborating with gift officers. It's also very helpful to be able to communicate how those funding priorities rank with one another. And so being able to go in and say, these are our top ranked needs, and differentiating of what you think are most likely to be internal funding opportunities versus what's going to be really sellable to a corporation or to donors out there. And knowing that your advancement and gift officers may have different ideas about how what's going to resonate with donors or not, but going in with that type of a prioritization is really key. And so those criteria that I showed before about centrality to mission, forward trajectory, we utilize that as a ranking process for both the idea as well as the funding priority standpoint. So that way, those gift officers always know how we see our own ranking of needs. Also valuable to have one-pagers that can be that gift officer can hand to any potential donor or corporation. And so in our case, we match a one-pager with each of the 30 objectives within our strategic plan. And we also detail it out by endowment opportunities that will sustain that program forever versus operational cash infusions. This is just another example here. And we do that for both staffing and program expansion efforts. So when we think about the next realm down on the circle of defining our key performance indicators, basically what success looks like and how we assess it. Just as there are strategic plans everywhere on a college campus, there are also pockets of data everywhere. And being able to really link into offices of institutional research, as offices of strategic planning and assessment, those are really data hubs that will have lots of valuable information about not only students on our campus, but how those benchmark across the nation to other programs. And that's extremely valuable, both in planning and in your fundraising efforts. And so one example here is the Ipeds Peer Analysis Center. There's a whole section within Ipeds, which is the federal reporting. It's the apples-to-apples reporting for every college and university in the country. They have data on veterans that you're able to go into the publicly available website for the peer analysis tool and compare your university to all other universities. And so really helpful information there. Also helpful to know that the National Student Clearinghouse collects a tremendous amount of information on student veterans, and that's another great comparative tool. And so basically anyone who applies to our institution, if they choose us or not, if they go elsewhere, we're able to see exactly where they go. We're able to see exactly how well they do and if they go on to graduate school. And so being able to map the prospective veterans that are interested in your programs and then where they go after graduation, or if they're choosing a different institution than yours, can help in the planning process too. And this is just an example here of where partnering with assessment and strategic planning offices can really help in not only assessing the programs, so partnering together, backing onto existing surveys that IR is putting out so that you're not recreating that wheel, you're just asking a couple of important questions for your particular chapter to be added on to other instruments. Or being able to leverage a lot of the assessment and accreditation reporting that's going on, just a mountain of valuable information. And likewise, the sharing process, you're going to have a lot of valuable data, whether it's student focus groups or informal surveys that you've done, or really informational interviews that offices of institutional research and assessment and strategic planning are going to find very valuable too. And so really engaging in that conversation of sharing is huge. This is another example of leveraging platforms of how we share information. And so thinking about assessment results and how we communicate across campus, being able to really populate a planning or research spotlight. And then thinking about how the communication of results can funnel throughout, whether it is at the culmination of the plan of looking at quarterly updates or using an annual embedding within the performance plan to look at progress. So at this point, I'll pause and would like to open for any questions or, yes. And we're being recorded in the back, so if you wouldn't mind mentioning into the microphone. Sure, be happy to share those. Other questions? Or best practices that you'd like to share from your own campuses?
I'm going to ask a quick question. So we're a brand new chapter. We are nowhere near doing this level of stuff. How do you dumb it down so I can just get through the next 3 months?
I think one of my favorite activities is hosting a lunch or just a very casual get-together, or even a coffee Zoom session, and doing that newspaper writing exercise of what are the headlines that you would just be over the moon if you saw our chapter achieve in the next 3 years to 5 years. And it's amazing, having that inclusive of a process of sharing ideas. The ideas that come are so much better than if we had had a conference session with a limited number of people. Things that we never would have even thought about have made our strategic plan because of having that type of idea generation.
And then what's next? After you do that?
Yeah. What's next is once you have those great ideas, coming to a consensus of how we're going to evaluate those ideas. And so is it what's going to have the greatest amount of impact on student belonging? Or is it going to be the number of students that have annual progress towards graduation? Or student satisfaction rates? How are we going to judge whether those great ideas were successful? And then rank order them, so that instead of walking into an administrator's office with 50 great ideas, you've narrowed them down to this was how we evaluated them, and this is what's most important to us. And then I would say third is looking for key collaborations across campus. And so a couple of hours of looking at different strategic plans across the campus. You may find that your best friend is the business school, or you may find that your very best friend is the student affairs division that has like goals that you can mutually, by having both in motion, you both can accomplish that better than if you could alone. And you also might find a lot of resources in that way. And I think getting people excited about it, once people, in the chapter see that not only has their great idea made the plan, getting that in front of the institution's strategic planning efforts, there were great ideas from our chapter that made the institution's level plan. And so that really generates that excitement and that resource element. And then we're going back to the chapter for progress reports and how things are going. And that information is then being shared in our Board of Trustees meetings. And so it's that cycle that once those foundational elements are in place, it becomes cyclical and really impactful after that. Other questions?
Hi. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry to do this, but can I ask your advice on like kind of a specific situation? So this was everyone's like first semester back on campus if your college returned to schooling. And it was very, very interesting because freshmen have not had a semester on campus, the sophomores had not had a semester on campus, and the juniors only had a single semester as freshmen. So nobody knew anything. A lot of information was lost in transition. So a lot of it ended up kind of being on like the seniors to be in these leadership positions. And personally, I ended up being involved in more things than I could handle with mixed success. And now entering this semester, like I'm involved in like a number of different things, and I'm trying to tie it to, we're the VSO, we're not even an SVA chapter yet, we have to incorporate as one. But there's a lot of like veteran success, veteran entrepreneurship that we want to do, and tying that in is like a venture capital fund that we have at our school, the Dean's Executive Council, a professional co-ed business society, as well as getting housing on campus for the veterans. And then there's like individual players that are very interesting, like Board of Trustees. Our new president just got announced yesterday. So it's like, there's an incredible amount of just like opportunity and things that are being involved right now. I'm not sure how to tie the strings together to make not even something happen, but just kind of everything, I guess, because we're going to get housing. Like NJIT, my school is the New Jersey Institute of Technology. Like they're going to help us pay for that because like everything's kind of in place to make that happen. But it's like we're kind of able to do a lot more because our chapter is very energized. We have a lot of great ideas. We had students come to this. Everyone's very excited. So it's more of like, how do I funnel all this opportunity into a product? Mm-hmm. Sorry, I know it's a lot.
Yeah, you mentioned wonderful things there, and I think two aspects come to mind immediately. One is again that prioritization of what, you know, if you could pick your top two, what would those be? The second would be to look for those synergies, because there may be things that help progress them much faster. If you find let's say that you look at this Division of Student Affairs strategic plan, and their top goal is student retention. If you make the parallel that having residential offerings on campus you think will aid in increasing veteran retention, those partnerships and synergies make things happen much faster.
Thank you so much. I'm going to reach out to the new president and ask what he's trying to accomplish and align it with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Other questions? How about best practices from your own campuses that you'd like to share? What have you found most impactful in linking and leveraging institutional planning, existing processes? Yeah.
Our SVA chapter became a twinkle in someone's eye 5 years ago, and she didn't have any student support because she's with our veteran office. We linked with the Director of Veterans Affairs who's on Student Council. So there's a student undergraduate position that's for veterans. And if there isn't one, there should be one, and it should be in the equity and inclusion genre of student government. And we were able to leverage tons of resources with student government to get started. It also helped with the process, and we were able to get funding to come here through student government. So that was my first thing. The second thing when we started, especially for those of you that are having chapters coming back together, we couched it as far as we know what SVA totally does, but what do we want to do? Like, what's our thing? Like, what's our why versus everybody else's why? So we don't have a lot of sports nuts, but we got outdoorsmen. So we're focusing on outdoors social activities rather than sporting activities. We don't have a lot of drinkers. We have a lot of family members. So we're doing more, kid zone stuff versus bar hopping. And that, I think, really helped get the people involved to have those headlines that we want to give back more than just party. So that might help. If you're trying to figure out what your floundering focus is find out what your people want to do. Like, they're not going to come if it's not fun. So that's kind of how we looked at it.
Great, thank you.
So, hi, I'm Jennifer Thurston with American University. And what we did, and we're still working on this, is that we have Inclusive Excellence on Campus campaign and initiative right now. And our campus has not actually been very veteran inclusive and supportive. We're not included in that initiative even. But I've been using that campaign and initiative to actually create a conversation and say, hey, you know, by definition of your inclusive excellence, it's a diverse, inclusive, and equitable campus with programs and policies that serve all students. And so, although our president never acknowledged this, we were able to get a conversation with the President's Council for Diversity and Inclusion. And so now they're going to start doing campus climate surveys, including some questions about whether military feel included on campus. We are now structuring a military advisory board or military connected advisory board, and we're actually, they're also going to start a census to know even who their military connected populations are on campus. So it took a lot of kind of fighting and plugging in, but like you said, if you can align your top headlines with what they're promising on campus with their initiatives, it's really difficult for them to say that you don't qualify or we are not going to support you. So.
Great, thank you. Other good news stories to share? Yes.
Kind of short, but hey, I'm at the University of Virginia, and what we found is that influence is everything across the board. So this past year, everybody got to go back on grounds, but literally every single month, we allowed our veterans to do every single thing they ever, well, obviously we have to, but everyone did every single thing they wanted to do, and we used our relationships and influence to impact what we wanted to do at the Veterans Center. We have people who are very passionate about breast cancer. We have people who are very passionate about football, and we managed to figure out a way to link them together, and we've been in the news 20 times over just the last 4 months on promoting our veteran services and promoting what we're able to do, and it's been able to move our needle forward tremendously. But overall, when I say move the needle forward, we finally have a meeting this spring with our provost, because you know, if you want something, you got to go where the money is, right? With our provost office, and we were able to come up with a plan to make sure that we can get all of our goals and all of the things we want at the school done at that time. But again, we would, like she said before, align your goals with what everyone else is doing in the school, and it has had a tremendous impact on the way we get things done, as well as it's allowing other veterans to come out of the woodworks. Because I know sometimes veterans don't like to wear their shield, their rocker, or whatever they want to call it, but having all these positive outlooks within the community has really helped us grow and really has helped shape our entire organization.
Great, thank you. I love how you highlighted, the ask and making sure that the needs and the wants are fully out there and expressed. Other shares? Really linking into the strategic planning process, when I look at the last iterations of the succession planning within our own chapter on campus, strategic planning can help with that so much as students graduate, and making sure that those good ideas are progressing forward, and so that the chapter knows what leadership teams 2 and 3 cycles back we're working on and accomplishing. so that it's not always starting at that scratch point. Thank you so much for your time today. I'll hang around here, and if I can help in any way possible, just let me know. Thank you so much.